The chaotic touch of harmony too, bonded by fire. By law-abiding pony. Chapter 5. CVN 77. Part 1 of 5. Alexia and the others eyed the Mayan lying on his back with careful suspicion. Most of the pony's breathing was starting to level out from the exertion of their flight from the fire hornets, but this was mostly artificial, so they did not show their captive any sign of weakness. The red-skinned humanoid stared at them with neither malice nor joy. Instead he only displayed an intense interest, focusing mostly on what he saw to be a mustard-yellow unicorn stallion as he assumed him to be the group's leader. The Herald had taken the pause in conversation to access the puppet's recent memories. The recollection of Alexia's actions only fueled his interest to the point where he broke the uneasy silence. Teleportation? Such an extremely rare ability. I remember hearing of its use only once before. In the America West Coast, if I'm not mistaken. Tell me your name, for I do not wish to know you by just your color and species. Toon wasn't sure what her appearance was, so she danced around the subject. My color and tribe are all you will get out of me as far as my identity is concerned. But I've heard of you, she said with curiosity of her own. A so-called holy apparition that blesses those by merely speaking with them. The mouthpiece of the gods and the glue that holds the Mayans of Earth together. So, she added with intrigued mirth. You're the cause of Earth's troubles. Yes. He regarded her with a twinge of disappointment. I see my ministers have failed to correctly inform you of our purpose. You will have to forgive their fanaticism, I know it can be grating to some. Nevertheless, if you have any love for your home world, you would be wise to aid my flock in their efforts to enlighten mankind. Crimson stood by her alpha and waved an enraged hoof in the air. We've seen your so-called enlightenment. Washington was in chaos for months, Madrid burned almost down to its foundation. I've seen pictures of London that I would have mistaken for World War II photos were it not for the modern landmarks. You want nothing more than to see the world burn. Conrad moved to Alexia's other side. Anything this guy says will be lies or half-truths, let's slit his throat and be done with it. The Herald was no stranger to fighting uphill battles. You see our methods, but not the reason behind them. Surely you already know, if my assumption of you being intelligence operatives is correct, that my flock has raided several of the lesser nations' nuclear stockpiles. If the world's destruction was our aim, I assure you the Earth would have been a radioactive rock by now. Such as it is, I've had my children dismantle every nuclear weapon we can get our hands on. I want this world to remain both intact and its biosphere healthy. Loki was the one to begrudgingly confirm his claim. She dug a hoof into the sand at the bitter taste of having to confirm part of the Herald's truth. Don't ask how I got it, but I found intel on several stockpiles being raided a few months back. However, I've got no word on what was done with the nuclear material afterwards. The puppet met Toon's eyes with a challenge. He suspected he would be more successful in weakening her loyalties to humanity if he appealed to her equanimity. You have spent these past years and your previous bipedal lives listening to the flawed ideals humanity triumphs. I can't blame you really, while this ponification, I believe you call it, has granted you immense purity of form and natural magic at the paltry cost of a couple of thumbs. Now that you have been released from your old species defects, you can forge a civilization in your new and better image. Not one steeped in corruption and political backstabbing, but of trust, honor and mutual friendship. Surely you cannot be so deluded as to wish to remain shackled by your human masters and defective morality. You have the audacity to try and recruit us. Conrad was more stunned than angry. Crimson scoffed at his arguments. You speak of defects and flaws when all I see are a bunch of red-skinned louts that are hell-bent on ravaging human society for the simple crime of existing. Nobody, species or otherwise, is free of faults. And I prefer human and pony faults over the Mayans any day of the week. Besides, I would never ask my human family to submit to your enlightenment. The Herald expected her venom. He had no delusions of being able to turn them on the spot, but to plant ideas in their heads. They need not join my flock, he directed his statement to Crimson. Random humans are turning into ponies, yes? If you could direct these changes and turn any friends and family you have into equines, then I assure you they will not be harmed by my crusade against the hairless apes. Toon had mused about the idea of intentional ponification in the past, outside of Discord's magic, but always dismissed it. However, his words made a question burn in her mind, but a more pressing one was vocalized first. I want to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. Tell me this at least, just to set the record straight. Are you an alien consciousness or are you the product of some madcap scientist? The puppet adopted a touch of caviar in his attitude. A little bit of both if you can believe it. Yes. I am as much of an alien as you are, physically anyway. I find it rather peculiar that there is a second non-spacefaring species appearing away from their home world. Loki was momentarily distracted by his wording. What do you mean second? The Herald inwardly cursed his slip of the tongue, but managed to play it off. I speak of the Zerdradians, a species native to Tangent Delta 9. A rather brutish people if there ever was one. It is a wonder they managed to get one of their own into space without driving themselves to extinction first. He spied the hint of a scholar's curiosity in Alexia's eye. Should the salvation of your human family, by means of enlightenment or ponification, not be sufficient motivation enough for you, I can uplift the people of Earth to join the Quarry Dust Confederation as full members. With all of the rights and privileges that includes. He eyed them carefully, trying to gauge their reactions. The only thing that I ask in return, is the elimination of humanity in its current form. No one needs to die. My masters will be more than welcoming of equines and Mayans alike. The burning question resurfaced in the Silver Mare's mind. Why single out humanity? If these quarry dust were xenophobic and wanted to wipe out all intelligent life but their own, I could understand that. Abhorrent, but understandable. But what makes us ponies worthy of joining this alleged galactic community over humanity? Crimson was appalled that the Mayan was even still breathing. Why are we even listening to this reincarnation of Hitler? Switch humans with Jews and both men would be spouting the same filth. Conrad pulled her aside to whisper away from the Herald. Sun Tzu said something along the lines of know your enemy and to learn how to defeat him. We need to learn what we can. She pushed him off. We've already learned exactly what we need to know. She jabbed a hoof in the Herald's direction. That monster is responsible for everything. With hate in her eyes, she reared up and stomped the ground. Before anyone could try and stop it, a spike of sand condensed and impaled the prone Mayan through the heart, killing him instantly. Good riddance to that asshole, the pale yellow mare growled at the corpse. Toon was disappointed that she didn't get the chance to do that herself. Did you really have to kill him at that moment? We could have found out why the Mayans keep trying to exterminate humanity. Crimson spat her disgust into the sand. He would have lied through his teeth to have our support. I think he and his ilk have made it abundantly clear they don't want a peaceful solution with humanity, and I bet they're just lying to the other ponies until they're not needed anymore. Conrad eyed the red-crowned pony with a touch of sympathy. I hope you're not that naive. Some may have needed lies to join them, but you saw what those Pegasi allowed back in the lab. It takes either some serious malice or complete indifference to let that many people get eaten in their cages. Or experiment on people like that, Loki added with equal repulsion. Alexia listened in silence as the Mayan's corpse started blackening at a rapid rate of decay. His dead eyes bore into the alicorn with two words in his expression, consider it. Her mates argued behind her as questions filled her head about the Herald's words. Just how much of what he said was true? Does he really only want humans gone, or is he playing my kind for fools so he can wipe out ponies later? My own kind's fate aside, why is he so fixated on humanity's destruction and keeping the Earth habitable? Colonization maybe? I don't think so. Seems a little too convoluted when you could just bomb the planet from orbit. Unless... Toon tried to think of a reason why planetary bombardment wasn't the Corridist's first choice, but she felt any explanation lacking. In the end, there was little she could do but sit there and wait for high wind to arrive with the transport. It left her with plenty of time to think about the future. Even if we succeed against the Mayans, can we even hope to fight the quarry dust when they arrive? Asterisk. Joachim Zoran was weary. It was the good kind of weary after a hard day's work. The sweat on his brow and the ache in his horn told him it was hard, while the equally tired faces of his co-workers and his advance paycheck let him know that his work was appreciated and necessary to the continued growth of Trinity. He grabbed his time card off the wall with his kinesis and clocked out. It was a new fully computerized model and all his card really had was his employee ID number, but it functioned the same as previous versions. This is the good life, no? To work openly and earn honest pay without having to flinch at the police or squatting in a beat-up house in the lowlands waiting for the FSB to find us. A unicorn mare walked up after him to clock out herself. Joachim, going anywhere tonight? She flashed him a flirtatious smile. The arrival of the 3 Russian stallions grabbed many mares' interest and the stallions quite enjoyed the reversal. Even so, he felt it was a strange situation to be in. A city where the women hunt for men, glory be to my manhood, or is it stallionhood now? He found the mare, Betty Roberts, to be a very attractive charcoal grey with a stark contrasting white mane. The fact that she was a unicorn as well only made her more appealing. It wasn't that he disliked the other tribes, but more that he preferred his own when looking for romance. He shook off his introspective to answer her. Nothing that can't wait for tomorrow. What did you have in mind? Well, you heard of the new Crave Theatre that just opened 2 days ago. Me and Carlin were thinking of watching Dick Dastardly, the musical, and we thought you'd enjoy a good guy movie with us. The teal stallion put up an act of giving it some thought by scratching his chin. My English is still rather bad, and I probably wouldn't understand half of what would be going on. This whole Equish thing is a godsend. Doesn't make life any easier around humans though. Still, Carlin has that nice shade of yellow fur and she's a unicorn to boot. He turned around and nodded. Sure, it sounds like fun. Her eyes lit up and she kissed him on the cheek. Great. Movies at 8:10. See you there. The mare ran for the exit while pulling her phone out of her saddlebag to call Carlin. Joachim gave her a head start before exiting the warehouse himself. The movie isn't for a few hours, so I think a meat lover's pizza is in order. I feel sorry for the Earthers and that herbivore diet they have to stick to. Me? I almost wish I was a Pegasus so I could have a better excuse to eat meat than just because I can. Halfway to the pizzeria, a familiar face walked over to him. The newcomer knew the Russian pony's English was improving, but not sufficiently for his liking, so he opened up in Equish. Mr. Zoran, my friend. How fare you this fine evening? Dr. Reed, Joachim said with a pleasant surprise at the pale ash-colored unicorn. Get done butchering patients early today. The old in mind, yet young in body physician laughed at the verbal jabbing. Only 5 died on the table today. A record low for the whole ward. Joachim responded with mock congratulations. Down from 8? I'd tip my hat to you if I was wearing one. The joking banter produced a few chuckles before Reed cleared his throat. Tell me something, Zoran. What do you think of Her Highness? The teal stallion looked up at the orange-tinted evening sky. Princessa Alexia. He remembered the only 2 times he had seen her, one on the news, and again when he first arrived in Trinity. She is divinity that walks the earth. Or flies, whichever suits her fancy, Reed quipped. Ha, that she does, Zoran replied with a jolly grin before slipping back into reverent tones. I cannot honestly say I was ever a pilgrim before growing fur, but I have been in a few holy places. Chapels mostly. And I will admit I could feel the sanctity of those places, but the princess? She radiates that godliness as if it was the most natural thing in the world. But I suppose it would be for a goddess. He stopped himself and laughed sheepishly at the surgeon. Sorry, doctor. I really shouldn't speak like that. The princess has made it clear she doesn't care for such labels. Reed nodded sagely as they walked down the street. The pizzeria was 2 blocks away, and the old soul had time to kill. She is rather unique in that regard. Don't you agree? The Russian waited for a few passing humans and ponies to walk by before answering. In that she herself is holy. Quite so, Reed waved at a few acquaintances of his before speaking again. I have always been a spiritual person, Mr. Zoran. The good Lord did right by me, but after I grew a horn and my life was tossed to the winds, I thought he had abandoned me in that accursed internment camp. But I was a fool. He did not abandon me, not in the slightest. For it was in that very camp that she appeared. In both stallions' minds, there was only one person he could be referring to. The Princessa. Reed smiled at his walking companion. The very same. The very moment I first heard her speak, I realized what the good Lord wanted me to know. He above is the God of mankind, of that there is no doubt in my mind. But Princess Alexia. Goddess Alexia, he spoke her name reverently, as if the act of speaking it required the utmost piety to bring her name true devotion. She is the deity of pony kind, at least for those of us on earth. While God tends to the souls of men, she watches after ours. The surgeon gently nudged Joachim to turn left rather than cross the street for the pizzeria. The teal stallion hesitated a bit before complying. I guess I can see what you mean. But I have met the Princessa. She always denounces such claims. Reed could sense lingering disappointment in his companion's voice. I fully understand your woe, my son. But you have to remember, God is ancient beyond history, but dear Alexia has been a goddess for barely 2 years now. Despite her power, she is barely a foal compared to God. She needs time to mature into herself and requires sustenance worthy of a deity. Joachim slowed a bit. The street they were on was less populated at this hour. He briefly acknowledged they were headed towards the eastern farmlands. You mean prayer and worship? But of course, Reed replied as if it was obvious. That is the one factor that every god or deity in our history required. I dare say that Alexia's growth has been stunted by a hunger she doesn't know she suffers from. Or is trying to ignore, Joachim suggested after a moment's thought. The physician's eyes gleamed at the prospect. I hadn't thought of that. I hope that's not the case. The idea of the princess starving herself out of some attachment to her mortal origins is troubling. In either case, I wanted to bring you in on a solution for that very problem. By now, the pair was nearing the closest farmhouse. They passed through rows of grain fields to the 2-story house that was already brightly lit from within and had a welcoming air to it. Joachim suspected what the old soul was alluding to. You've started a congregation. Indeed I have. I've been aware of your reverence for the princess for some time now, and I felt you would feel right at home with us. The teal pony was still weary, but not because of Reed. She won't like this if she finds out. The would-be clergyman sighed with a mixture of sadness and hope. I know. He marched up the 2 steps and rapped a hoof on the door. Some shouting for patience later, a pink earth mare opened the door and smiled at the sight of the surgeon. Mr. Reed. I was getting worried you might be late. He chuckled as Pack Rat led him and Joachim inside. Have no fear, my dear. I would not do our revered princess such a disservice were it not for a noble cause. He waved a hoof in the Russian's direction. I brought another prospective convert. Joachim was still a little dubious. So what are we going to be doing exactly? Reed knew he sounded like an aspiring cult leader. Well, if I'm going to be honest with myself, I suppose that's exactly what I am about to be. Hopefully I can do it right and one day give rise to a proper church. He gave Joachim a sincere smile. Don't worry, my friend. I will tell everyone all at once. I'm sure we have some cool aid around here somewhere. Joachim froze at the offer and gave the old stallion a worried look. To his credit, Reed managed to hold a straight face for 10 full seconds before busting out in laughter. Pack Rat joined in a moment later. Joachim nervously joined in the cheer. You had me going there for a minute. End of part 1.